just can make it work every time. And someone would say, is this love? And everyone would say everything.
They told you reggae was just music. These 12 songs were actually secret weapons designed to topple governments and rewrite history. One track on this list was so powerful, it was banned on 3 continents. Stay until the end, because the final song contains a hidden message you've never heard, even if you know the lyrics. Jimmy Cliff had once stood at a crossroads of his own, wrestling with the many rivers he knew he had to cross. And even now, the echoes of his journey seem to guide the stories of every artist who came after him. His voice, trembling between hope and burden, whispered a reminder that no rise is clean and no transformation painless. And as he carried that longing across decades, he unknowingly prepared the soil for the storms and visions that would follow. When Winston Rodney, known to the world as Burning Spear, summoned the name Marcus Garvey with reverence, he reached into the bedrock of identity itself. He rebuilt the memory of a man whose message had been scattered like seeds. That liberation does not begin in a battlefield, but in the psyche of the oppressed. Burning Spear did not simply sing of Marcus Garvey. He resurrected him, calling back the spirit of dignity and the urgency of self-knowledge. The song became less an homage and more a ceremonial awakening, a reminder that a people asleep in their history were a people vulnerable to their future. Yet even before that awakening could settle,
get up, stand up for your rights.
Peter Tosh shattered every illusion of passive peace. In the fierce cadence of equal rights, Peter Tosh refused the world's superficial offerings. He replaced softness with steel, replacing quiet endurance with confrontation. He demanded justice that was not coded in rhetoric, equality that was not a theoretical dream. And though the world often preferred unity as a song rather than a demand, Tosh insisted that peace without justice was merely silence, pretending to be harmony. His growl, unfiltered and unrepentant, revealed the spine of reggae as much as its soul. Still, prophecy has a way of slipping through cracks in unexpected places. When Joseph Hill of Culture envisioned a world trembling under the weight of revelation in 2/7's clash, he was not playing the mystic. He was pointing towards something everyone felt but dared not articulate. A storm pulsed beneath daily life in Jamaica, a sense that society was marching toward a collision between injustice and awakening. Joseph Hill's voice became a bell tolling, not for doom, but for reckoning. And on the day people believed prophecy had come, entire neighborhoods fell, still fearful, hopeful, unsure whether divine judgment or deliverance was at the door. Yet the door of Babylon has always been fragile. Max Romeo knew this, with an intuition sharpened by the turbulence of the 1970s. When he carved out the song titled War in a Babylon, he crafted a portrait of a society cracking under corruption and the unseen spiritual tremors beneath it. His warning was never only about Jamaica, it was about every nation where power fermented into oppression. Every street where desperation grew into revolt. With each verse, he painted Babylon as both a physical landscape and a moral condition, a place where injustice festered until collapse became inevitable. And collapse breeds both survivors and truth-tellers. Among those truth-tellers stood Buju Banton, long after the fires of the earlier era had carved their scars into the Caribbean consciousness. In Untold Stories, he abandoned bravado and instead held up the raw, unvarnished reality of the poor man's struggle. He laid out the decisions people make when pushed into corners by poverty, by systems designed to fail them, by hopes deferred so long they feel like myth. His confessions were not pleas for pity, they were declarations of human complexity. Reminders that morality is often distorted by hunger, circumstance, and survival. Yet Buju's voice, though heavy, also lifted. It pointed towards self-improvement, choosing light where shadows seemed inevitable. But shadows have always been thickest where power is most threatened. When members of Black Uhuru crafted the haunting Guess Who's Coming, they were not speaking of a friendly gathering. They spoke of dread, of forces arriving disguised as order but carrying oppression. They sang of dreadlocks, suffering, of surveillance, of political machinery tightening around cultural identity. Their harmonies, sharpened by Sly Dunbar and Robbie Shakespeare's revolutionary rhythms, turned the song into an atmosphere half warning, half lament, all truth. And truth is, what Steel Pulse carried like ammunition. When they unsheathed the Handsworth Revolution. They documented a Britain pretending at multicultural harmony while hiding its fists behind authority. In Birmingham streets, West Indian communities bore the brunt of a nation grappling with identity and prejudice. And Steel Pulse translated those bruises into sonic rebellion. They did not soften the blow, they amplified it. Every lyric lifted the grievances of a people who had been told to assimilate into silence. The Handsworth Revolution was not merely a song, it was testimony, fire wrapped in rhythm. Yet amid all these fractures and flames, Garnet Silk dared to dream backward and forward at once. When he cried out in Hello Africa, his voice carried ancient memory and future longing. He called across oceans to a continent many in the diaspora had never touched but felt carved into their bones. He spoke as a child, separated from a parent, yearning not just for land, but for belonging. The call of Hello Africa pierced through centuries of displacement, turning sorrow into a vision of homecoming. And while Garnet Silk searched for home, the Gladiators insisted on its foundations. In Roots Radix, they revived the sacred idea that liberation cannot flourish without identity, that roots are more than nostalgia, they are the anchor of resistance. Their melody urged people to reclaim what colonial structures tried endlessly to strip away: heritage, spirituality, cultural sovereignty. The Gladiators stood as architects of remembrance, defending the truth that a disconnected people are a conquered people. Across this landscape of struggle and rebirth, Bob Marley and the Wailers rose not as entertainers, but as global messengers. When they carried Haile Selassie, I's thunderous declaration into the world through their song titled War, they transformed political speech into spiritual decree. Bob Marley became the conduit for a universal indictment that racism, exploitation, and inequality were not abstract evils, but active wounds tearing humanity apart. His voice charged the air with prophecy. There would be war, he insisted, until the philosophy of superiority was buried. He sang not to comfort, but to awaken. Every listener became a witness, and every witness became accountable. And then, as though the world needed both spark and torch, Bob Marley and Peter Tosh stood shoulder to shoulder once more in the song titled Get Up, Stand Up. Their message was no longer philosophical, it was a direct command. They urged people to refuse resignation, to challenge systems that thrived on compliance. The song vibrated with rebellion, declaring that rights were not gifts handed from above, but truths demanded from below. And in that single anthem, reggae revealed its core mission, not just to soothe, not just to celebrate, but to mobilize. Yet between these storms, there existed quieter, more introspective rivers, like those Jimmy Cliff once crossed. His voice traveled through time, reminding listeners that resilience is a pilgrimage, not a moment. The struggles recounted by every other artist echoed inside his journey, the way mountains echo thunder that has already passed but still reshapes the air. Jimmy Cliff's stretching journey became the thread connecting generations of storytellers navigating their own rivers, whether political, spiritual, or personal. And the rivers kept widening. When Buju Banton exposed wounds deeper than pride, when culture announced the trembling of a divine calendar, when Steel Pulse shouted from Birmingham's burning pavements, when Max Romeo tracked Babylon's descent into chaos, when the Gladiators planted roots where colonizers tried to salt the soil, each act became a chapter in an unmistakable tapestry. Reggae was not forming a genre. It was forging a map through oppression itself. Still, every map holds a hidden legend, And that legend often begins where identity fractures. This is why Burning Spear's devotion to Marcus Garvey remained so essential. He was not simply praising a leader. He was restoring the foundation upon which every other cry for justice stood. Without Garvey's blueprint, the cries of equal rights would echo without direction. Without Garvey's call for mental emancipation, the declarations of war would lose their ideological spine. Without Garvey's Pan-African vision, the yearning of Hello Africa would float without anchor. And without Garvey's affirmation of pride, the Handsworth Revolution would feel like chaos rather than continuity. Even Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, cryptic and foreboding as it was, whispered of identity under siege identity that Garvey insisted must be defended. And as the decades unfurled, that defense became not just cultural, but spiritual. Reggae's prophets understood that Babylon was not only a geographic power, but a psychological empire. Max Romeo warned of its war. Peter Tosh refused its peace. Buju Banton exposed its poverty-driven traps. Black Uhuru sang of its oppressive intrusion. Steel Pulse documented its policing. The gladiators rebuilt resistance beneath its shadow. And Bob Marley, through war and through Get Up, Stand Up, declared its inevitable fall. But amid these voices, gifts of healing also appeared. Jimmy Cliff's Reflections provided breath where fire had scorched the narrative. Many Rivers to Cross was never an anthem of defeat. It was an acknowledgement of human endurance, a reminder that the fight for dignity is often internal before it becomes external. His words carried a softness no less powerful than Tosh's fury or Max Romeo's warnings. They offered the emotional truth that revolutions, spiritual or political, require vulnerability as much as strength. As each voice shaped the evolving consciousness of reggae, what emerged was not just a sequence of songs, but a chronicle, a living documentary forged in drumbeats and declarations. Their music stands as both testimony and warning, compass and confrontation. And though eras change and nations shift, the heartbeat of their message remains steady, echoing through generations like a drum that refuses to be silenced. Now you've heard the truth. Which message hit you the deepest? Tell me the one song from this list you believe could change a mind today. Drop your answer in the comments. Follow for more breakdowns of the music they never wanted you to understand.